Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're in for a special treat this morning. I've known this man and his family for almost 40 years. And it's my honor and privilege to have an opportunity to watch his life and contribute and watch his contributions to the world of Dallas and Texas and the Navy and the United States and the world. A few facts and then a couple of quick stories. I'm going to try to put 40 years into 4 minutes. Most of his life so far, he was spent in the military, the Navy. And so let's begin at the end, 4 years ago, when he retired from the Navy after 35 years of service. And 29 of those 35 years were as a flag admiral. And starting in 1977, when he graduated from the Naval Academy, although you'll hear later, it actually started, in my opinion, much earlier than that. The U.S. Navy divides the world into 7 areas. So if something comes to the attention of the Navy, then it goes up through one of those 7 areas. And the Admiral ended his naval career as the commander of the Pacific Fleet in 2012. And 51% of the world falls under that sector of the Navy. Prior to that, he was in the Pentagon. He was the 57th Vice Chief of Naval Operations in the history of our wonderful United States. He served as a naval aviator with 4,700 hours of flight time, over 750 carrier landings, and 77 combat missions. He was also a Blue Angel for an unprecedented 3 years. Now, that's where he ended that career. And I said to him as he left that career, I'm going to take it as part of my job to help you do more in your next career than you've done in the Navy. And he's on that track, in my opinion. But now I'd like to start at the other end of his life and career. When he was in high school at Jesuit here in Dallas, my beloved friend and his father, who was a basketball coach and later raised millions of dollars for Jesuit, came to his firstborn son and said, "You know, I'm a big fan of education, and I'm thinking that you should go to college." He said, "But you're the first of 6 children that are already on the ground, and your mother and I probably aren't going to be able to help very much with the expenses from college, so you need to be thinking and planning about that." And so, as his father was a planner, so is Pat. And I believe at a very young age, maybe even before he was in high school, he started figuring out a way to get his college education paid for. And it was the Naval Academy. And he's one of their spectacular graduates. Another foundational piece of wisdom, which he heard and adapted, was when he was young in the Navy. He was sent to interview an admiral. And after officially ending that interview, he asked the admiral, he said, "May I ask you a personal question off the record?" And the admiral said yes. And he said, "Well, I'm not even sure that I'm really interested in this answer, but how does somebody go from where I am to where you are?" And the admiral paused and he said, "Well, to me, it's one of the sad things about our Navy, that in the upper levels, the pyramid is so steep that we lose a lot of good leadership because there's just not enough place for them. And nobody gets to where I am without somebody reaching down and helping to pull them up." This man has been about pulling people up since probably before that time. Another opportunity when young in the Navy is he applied to be a White House fellow. I love stories from other people because they tell us their whole world about what they saw in somebody. And so he applied when he was very young in the Navy to be a White House fellow, a very prestigious position, and didn't make it. But one of the old saws of the interviewees came to him and said to him, you're not going to be selected. But, and I've never made this request to anybody else in my history with the White House fellows, but I want to ask you to please go get something more on your resume and please come back and reapply, because we need men like you in the White House fellows. He did. He went and became a Blue Angel. I don't know how many of you are military or Navy, but in the Blue Angels, everybody serves only a one-year term. But it's such a precision job at the end of each show. They have 6 planes that go, that are so close to each other that nobody serves just 1 year. Everybody serves a second one-year term. But it's also true that nobody ever serves a third one-year term. He did. This is the story of his life and his service. Everywhere he goes, he does something differently. While a Blue Angel, he met his lovely wife, Andy, and the mother of their 2 wonderful children. We gave an engagement party for them at our Lone Star Ranch south of Dallas near Waxahachie. And we bought a big tent in case it rained. And it looked like it was going to rain. And as we got closer and closer to the event, I could see the Admiral smiling. I mean, boy, did it ever look like it was going to rain. There was a nasty storm coming south from Dallas. And it looked like we were going to need the Navy to rescue us from there. And the storm passed right over our home and right over the tent. And twice the distance from here to the corner of that room, the water started. So we didn't get the rain, even though we were prepared for it. Again, that's just kind of the wonderful life that he's led. One more quick story. All these from long ago, but they tell who this man is and who he's going to be in our world. When he was promoted to Admiral, we went to Washington for that ceremony. And the ceremony wasn't going to start for about 30 minutes, and you don't even know this story, I don't think. You don't know, you know part of it, but you don't know the key part of it. And so I was just milling around out front, and an officer, I think he was a 2-star admiral, comes running by, and he says to me, he says, what are all these people milling around about? And I said, well, we're here for one of your own who's being promoted to admiral. And I asked him if he knew Pat Walsh, and he said no. He said, can I see the program? And so I handed him the program, and he looked at it with me, and he said, this is wrong. He said, this is, somebody took a copy and pasted, and you've got 2 people's history in this program, not one. Nobody can accomplish what's in this program. And so, that was so out of character to me for knowing who this man was, because he's such an attention to detail. And so 2 or 3 days later, I asked him, I kept that program and I showed it to him. And didn't tell him a word about this story. I just said, you know, is this correct? And he looked at it line by line. He said, absolutely. And that's the kind of man that he is. That's the kind of man that I introduced to you now. Have a wonderful day.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for the time and opportunity to talk to you about, I think, the critical issues of our time. As John mentioned and Bill mentioned, I left here in 1973 and had plans on coming back quickly after Annapolis. In 2012, I came home. And came home to Dallas in a way that one, very appreciative of the city and all the leadership that has gone into Dallas with groups like Success North Dallas. Remember, the Dallas that I grew up in on Walnut Hill Lane was right down the street from the beer barn, and that's where you could take your pickup truck and your gun rack, and you could drive in and you could have someone serve you, and you could just drive on your merry way. And I come home to the sophistication of a wonderful city that's continued to grow in ways that make me very proud. In the course of my time in the Navy, I had opportunity to interact with many fellow Texans, and it was always fun to banter about the Cowboys and to talk about our respective lives, where we came from. And one of those gentlemen that I met one day was a West Point graduate who was on his way to a series of appointments on Capitol Hill for a position he was taking with the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization, otherwise known as Star Wars. His name was Patrick O'Reilly, and he was on his way to go through a series of interviews on his path to become the director of that organization, a promotion to a 3-star. And he had just come back from a series of discussions in the House with House leadership, and was on his way back to the Senate. Because of the nature of his mission and responsibilities associated with it, members of Congress wanted to see who, in fact, was going to be sitting in the seat and have such responsibility for a portfolio that was several $1 billion and a lot of technology that was looking into the future. So I asked Patrick how the interviews go on the Hill, and he said, well, they've all gone pretty well. I mean, this is a fairly predictable sort of set of discussions that we have with members of Congress, except for one. And there was one representative I sat down with, and I just knew from the beginning I was going to have trouble. So, well, what were the questions? He said, well, every time I got a question associated with the work that I've been doing in the course of my career and what I intend to do if confirmed by the Senate, I was interrupted. And the representative would look at me and fold her arms, shake her head with every answer that I was giving. And I said, well, it seems pretty odd. What was she saying? I said, well, she was telling me that I was speaking in passive voice, that I had the wrong syntax. And he said, you know, I'm from Fort Worth. I understand syntax, but I don't know syntax.